I went to the big bounce park, adult bouncy castle. There was a weird smell in the air. You run past and you're making like 5 people fall over.
Here's a whole bunch of radioactive material, kids. Have fun.
That does seem like it's pretty cool, but that's dangerous.
It's funny because we look at that today and go, that's dangerous because we now know, but they didn't know that then. Like you're doing the sound or whatever.
When
like you land between the springs.
Yeah, I'm still missing a bit of my eyebrow here. Like somewhere in between here, it's a little thin.
Welcome to XYYourZ. It's the generational debate comedy. I'm your host, Nathan Kliem, representing Generation X. Beside me, we have Kian Gilroy.
From surviving the school system to never being, oh my gosh, from surviving the school system to never being able to buy a house, I am representing Gen Z.
Nice. And our guest today, he's a musician, he's a realtor, he's a former youth pastor, and a dad of 2 representing millennials, Tyson Kliem.
We understand analog and digital. Yes, sir.
Analog and digital. Been around for that. Why don't I introduce the segment? So today we're going to be talking about bouncy castles, and we're going to be talking about which generation has had the most tech change.
I have a quick little tidbit of like a before and after. Do you mind if I screen share quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have here our first ever bouncy castle made by, what's this guy's name? John Scurlock in 1959.
That's the first ever bouncy castle?
It's the first one that was kind of like made everywhere.
Okay.
Here's one of our first bouncy castles, otherwise known as the Space Pillow.
The Space Pillow.
Yeah, that was one name for it.
That's legit.
You know what those look like? Those kind of look like those bouncy marshmallows or whatever you call them that you see at a lot of farmer places now, or like if you're going to a corn maze or if you're going to like a pumpkin patch, a lot of those places have, what do you call those? A bouncing pillow? But it looks exactly like that. Like
a bouncing pad or something like that. Yeah. It's like half buried into the ground. The kids can run up on them and just jump around. It's a little bit of a different fabric, but yeah.
Yeah, that very first one there.
It's made of like a really heavy-duty vinyl material. I was trying to look up the actual name of the material, but all it was telling me was a heavy-duty vinyl material.
Yeah, probably to withstand. That's all that they had at that time. What year did that come out?
That came out in 1959.
1959.
That's when our parents were kids.
Oh, I know. When the boomers were having fun.
And then after the first bouncy castle, which was pretty much just a big pillow on the ground, they added walls to the bouncy castles.
Did you have a year on this one or no?
I do not.
This is like early 2000s or mid 2000s.
Now we have these crazy bouncy castles. You might be familiar with this bouncy castle, actually. Boom!
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the wee bit.
I've been to some of these water parks. These things are legit.
Yes, but like, I mean, you don't realize exactly how exhausted you get on one of those because you're constantly fighting for balance.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't go on that now. I mean, I'd be gassed just getting onto the stupid thing. Right?
They're a lot of fun. They're actually a little bit more sturdier than you think, but yeah, you're right. It does require a lot of balance around those things, but dude, they're fun.
You can definitely tell how the ideas and technology has changed over the years from being just the typical, hey, let's grab some PVC or let's grab some tarps that we have in the back, sew them together and create an idea. Now it's become a pretty big industry.
Yeah, and there's more plans and other stuff out there. Like now you can buy, like I know we bought one for our kids, a bouncy castle for the backyard for $300 or less than that. I think it's like $200, and it has like a ladder, a slide, and it goes into a pool.
Oh my gosh!
You can get some crazy things for your backyard that's just accessible now, thanks to Alibaba and all that other fun stuff.
Oh, thanks, yeah. Kian, didn't your brother work for a bouncy castle guy one time?
Yeah,
setting up bouncy castles for a while.
Did he?
Yeah.
I know exactly the company that he worked for. I used to rent from them.
Oh,
I
did you?
didn't know.
Yes, all the time.
Yeah.
They have like all sorts of like they have like ones that are like jousting arenas. They had like the bungee run where it's like you had two tracks and then you'd like hook up a harness that was tied to a bungee rope behind you and you have to try and run as far as you can and stick down like
A marker or a flag or something like that.
You get as far as you can and then it just launch you backwards and they had all sorts of things. Do you remember that was the game show where they had like stuff like spinning stuff? People had to run through like a maze. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Oh God, that'll come to me as soon as I stop thinking about it.
Something or whatever. But it was like we're like running
Extreme Challenge. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and so they have like all these kind of courses in bouncy castle format, so you don't get nearly as hurt. But yeah,
I was thinking of Wipeout when you were saying that.
That's it. That's a Wipeout. But it used to be MXC from
Most
Japan.
Extreme
MXC
Challenge.
Most Extreme Challenge.
That was the Japanese version, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's where it like originated from, and then they brought it over to Canada or to North America.
Okay, so from the first Bouncy Castle to now, do you think we have gotten more safe? We have gotten less safe? Do you think we're taking more chances? Do you think the boomer generation took more chances? What do you guys think? Tyson?
Oh, well, the boomers totally. Anytime you innovate something is you have the most like challenges or the most like freedom in something, and then people start getting hurt, and then society becomes litigious, and like there's all these rules, and there are rules because there's a story behind every rule, or there's a story behind every law, or those kind of things. So you've had some pretty wild things probably back in your day, and then our day things were a little bit like more like boundaries and guardrails in place, and then you got Kian's generation where they probably a lot more. But then the cool thing is they've gotten to a point now where they can make everything kind of safe. But then at some point, there's got to be a bit of a brain drain or something. Like I just saw a video of my buddy who was in New Zealand, and they're walking on this trail, like very popular hiking area, but legit the cliff is like right there. There's no fence. Like if this is the United States, they would have like 10 feet back, they would have a fence built and like all these signs and disclaimers, and still people would hop that fence and go over and fall off the edge. Like, but just I think there's got to be that balance of like risk and other stuff. But
well, and that's what I'm thinking too. Like, I think what it happens is the older generation, like say the boomers or my generation, they're the first ones to try all these new, neat, and cool things and try all the risks. But then when they have kids, they're like, oh my God, I remember how dangerous it was and how stupid we were. So therefore, I don't want you making the same mistake. The next generation, they have kids. They're like, wow, we were crazy. So therefore, we're going to make it even more safer. And at one point, do you lose all situational awareness, or do you lose the fact that, oh, hey, common sense says that this is dangerous if I were to do that?
Like, I remember trampolines back when we were kids. Remember when we got our first trampoline, Nate? It was like a Sundance trampoline, one of those like tarp material things. And like, I remember at my buddy's place, we'd hop off, like we'd jump off the roof of their house onto the trampoline and everything. And then I remember like always getting double bounce, and either you land on the floor and you're like you're doing the sound or whatever, or like you land between the springs. And thankfully, I still have kids. Like,
do you remember Uncle Wolfgang's trampoline that he had up for their system, for their kids and whatnot? He had given that to us. The kids hadn't used it in like a decade, so we got an old school trampoline that had no fences on it nowadays. And Kian, I think you had a very interesting interaction with that trampoline.
Yeah, I'm still missing a bit of my eyebrow here. Like somewhere in between here, it's a little thin.
So is that because you and maybe your brother were double bouncing or trying to see who can get the highest in flips or whatnot, or did you just, what had happened?
We were double bouncing, but at that point, like, a couple of trees had fallen on the trampoline, so there was a couple of holes, so you gotta, like, make sure you don't bounce in the middle, so we're, like, double bouncing each other on the sides of the trampoline, and I realized I wasn't over top of the trampoline anymore, so I went to grab onto the tree and just slid down and hit my face on a root.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! So now I guess
well, I remember,
if you can't order you can't order trampoline now without side nets.
Yeah, or and they also have like springless trampolines where it's like they're like or whether they're like
the
straight line springs or
diagonal.
whatever, but they're angled. Yeah, they're diagonal, and then that kind of creates more. But they don't have nearly the same bounce as they used to. Like the best were like those old school trampolines. That was like the tart material. You put some like water and dish soap on them, and then you're just like you can't even stand up straight. And it's like, and it was just the funnest thing out there.
You know, some kid has to go lose a finger in one of the springs because it gets pinched or something like that. Now all of us have to suffer. How often have you heard that before?
But like, wasn't it kind of a thing back in the day? Like, and now I'm speaking like back in the day, like '80s back in the day, where it's kind of a thing where, okay, if you got hurt, it was kind of like your own fault, like you're a bit of an idiot. And now it's like we've, like, in so many things have become so overprotected on things where it's like, okay, like basically an idiot should be able to walk in there, do whatever they want without any supervision and come out safe, and that's a good thing, right? But there's no prefrontal cortex like thinking about risk or assessing that, and we're losing that natural selection piece to the evolution cycle right now.
Yeah, I think too, like if you take away all the risks, all the dangers, then you become habitualized to everything's being safe. Therefore, you don't think about dangers. And then that's where you get what's called, I guess, the snowflake generation, where they're like, they bruise at the smallest thing or they don't have the tenacity. Kian, your thoughts?
That made me you saying that made me think of Tyler. I don't want to be mean, just thinking of the younger generation. Like, yeah.
Gen Alpha?
Gen Alpha. Well, it's funny because like even in playgrounds now, they like playground designers are starting to reintroduce risk into playground design, and so they're not creating playgrounds to be all 100% safe. Like there's a big park. They built it about 10 years ago out in Richmond called Terra Nova, and there it's like all just like logs all stacked on top of each other, and they go up like 10 feet or whatever. And sure, there's wood chips down below to buffer your fall, but they're like, no, we want to reintroduce risk into play and not just make everything 100% safe, because kids need to understand, because if you don't learn those consequences at a young age, like where there's minimal chances for, catastrophic failure, then you're not going to learn that as you get older.
The playgrounds in the parks there, you have one kid fall off the swing, land on their arm, and break their arm. Mm-hmm. I think didn't Toby do that?
Toby did that, yeah.
Our brother, yeah. Off the swing, lands on his arm, snaps it. I know Tyler was doing that. So Toby's now in his late 40s. Tyler is 10, 11. He's standing on top of a jungle gym doing the dance. Slip, bam, 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 all the way down. Breaks his arm. So you're like, what do you think was going to happen? It only takes 2 seconds for you to fall off, and then I guess we all got to learn the hard way sometimes.
But then now he knows, right? And now he knows he's never gonna do that again. Or like I remember when I was a kid, I was playing a game and I dove out and I smashed my head into the ground and chipped this whole tooth off. And now I know if I have to dive, I want to keep my head up and like these things. So yeah, pain is a powerful teacher, and yes, we want to protect people as much as possible from things, but I think there's got to be some point where you still integrate some form of risk.
Well, okay, so the bouncy houses, think about that. Are they safer now, or do you think people are just as stupid and you can get just as injured? Kian, what were your experiences in that big bounce?
I went to the big bounce park that came through, and it's and like the big adults bouncy castle. Yeah. So there was a weird smell in the air. A lot of people were drinking adult drinks, and I don't know, it's like when you go into the actual bouncy castle part, the entire area is just full of people. Like there's nowhere you run past and you're making like 5 people fall over because you're heavier than them. It's a lot going on. There's like a lot of structures that you're supposed to be able to climb up. Like in here, you can see some things where you climb up to the top of them, but like you can't really climb up to the top of them safely because there's people running down below. Like you fall off and you land on someone, that's not good.
One, and that just sounds like to me a lack of regulation, like a lack of them actually putting proper rules in place. Where if you're going to have a free for all, then yeah, somebody's going to hurt when you overload a system. Like usually those bouncy houses, they have like, okay, there's a 6-kid maximum, or they have a weight like the ones we had bought for our kids in the backyard. They're like, yeah, there's a 250-pound weight limit on it, or those kind of things. And so it sounds like the organizers of this event just kind of threw all that stuff out the window and just said, let's just have a free for all. They're adults, they should be able to do it. But I think there's like at some point, like I don't know, I think that's a little bit idiocy. Like those.
Well, when do we lose, and this is if I remember the point, when do we lose we take responsibility for our own actions? Like, when did we lose that? When does it become the responsibility of, say, like the promoters, and when does it become, say, the responsibility of the user? Because I think nowadays we've been given the permission to act like idiots and then blame other people.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. What's it called when you sign something so that if you do get hurt, the people aren't held accountable? What is that?
Waiver?
A waiver? Yeah. Now we have like waivers that pretty much make it so it's like, oh, I got hurt and you didn't give me a waiver, so I'm going to take your money. It's like, no, you chose to do that.
And nowadays, like on those kind of events, they make you sign a waiver that releases all general liability kind of thing from the organizers and those kind of things. They have the initial thing. A bouncy castle is fine, and they're great. But then I think you still got to have certain specific kind of parameters around it. But then if you don't have those parameters, then they got to make them even safer. And then, then people continue to push the envelope of them. And then you got to make them even safer. But I think at some point there's a line where it's like, okay, idiocy. And this is where I'm saying like the whole natural selection thing, it kind of gets broken down with this whole thing, because it's like, okay, these people probably would have been weeded out years ago with their own antics. But
yeah, how did we become the top of the food chain from like assessing danger and dealing with it accordingly? That's how we grew to the state we're at now.
We're devolving now.
Yeah.
So, viewers, what are your experiences? What kind of crazy interactions or crazy extreme event did you guys participate, and did you live and survive to tell about? Let us know down in the comments. Do you think we're taking more risks? Do you think we're taking less risks as a society? Do you think these bouncy castles are a germ cesspool, petri dish breeding ground? Like, what are your thoughts?
There are a lot of germs. A lot of kids running around.
Snot rockets. A lot of face plants, snots. Yeah.
Dude, so we were at a night market this summer with our kids, and our kids' favorite activity there is these giant, I call them the hamster balls on water. Like, they're legit, like, inflatable balls that they go into, and then how they inflate them is with a leaf blower, and they blow in. But then I was watching them like sanitize these things in between kids, and what they'd do is they would have the leaf blower in there, and then they would spray through the intake a bunch of Lysol. Aerosol Lysol, like that's gonna kill anything in this whole thing. I'm like, ugh, like
that's just an air freshener. That's not contacting the surface. Like how? Okay, so
99% of germs, but
it's a hamster wheel, inflatable hamster wheel floating on water. What I want to know is like. It's sealed. It's got to be inflated, right? It's a soft, pliable surface. So, are you time limited to that? Like what's the CO2 buildup going to be?
Like it was like 8 minutes or whatever, and one of our kids was able to kind of like hide around the other ones, and they have a number on them. So what they do is they had the system where it's like, okay, they'll have the number, they'll call the number, then they'll go grab it and pull them out. But our kid was smart enough where he put the number on the bottom and just sat down and laid in the thing, and he was in there for 20 minutes before finally we made him get out. We're like, okay, dude, like. Go up to the attendant, like, we want to go home.
Oh, God. But what's his, like carbon monoxide count in his bloodstream? Do they have a headache? Did he get brain damage? Is he okay? What?
His grades have taken a dip since then. So,
what kind of stupid stuff have you guys done?
To your question, like, I think we've we are taking more risks, but I think technology has gotten better to be able to take some of those risks. But we're doing more risks with more safety measures in play. And some things, I don't know. That's what I think. Like more bungee jumping or more of those things. There's a lot more of extreme kind of stuff that people are doing because there's better technology or things out there to do them. But I think people, in mass with those things have also gotten dumber, or they just don't think about the consequences when they do it.
I think if you're not pushing the envelope, then you throw in all your safety measures. I think it's when you're pushing the envelope on an idea or on something, that's where you take the risk. And it really depends. Is it an educated risk, or is it just a stupid risk where you don't think about what the potentials for something to go wrong are? So I think too, when you look at, say, stunts in the TV industry or for theatricals, it's risky, it's dangerous, but they calculate what the risks are, and they take those mitigations to do the effect. So I think that's where a lot of it gets lost. People who are impressionable see other people doing risky things, and they're like, oh, well, that looked easy, but they don't understand the setup and the time it took to mitigate as many risks as possible to do that stunt or whatever. So
yeah, and it's also it's the influencers, the Instagram influencers and stuff. Like, how many people? There's just a story, I think it was this year, last summer, where a influencer wanted to take a picture off near a cliff. I think it was over by Shannon Falls, and they want to take a picture of themselves by the edge, and they slipped and they totally fell for the sake of an Instagram picture. And there's lots of stories you read about that of people trying to get a cool, more extreme picture.
Just for the clicks, just for the gram, just for the whatever, not realizing that, hey, it's a matter of inches sometimes. Right? And you hear that time and time again. I wonder how many stories there are of people or influencers that have passed away. I wonder what the real numbers are. That'd be scary.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, let's not leave it on that bad, but let's take a quick break. Coming back, we'll be talking about which generation has had the most number of technology changes. Is it the boomer that had the biggest technology changes? Is it millennials? Is it Gen Z? Stay tuned.
This episode is sponsored by Moving Friends Forward, where your real estate journey feels like working with friends. With honest advice, local expertise, and your best interests first, they help you buy or sell with confidence. Learn more at movingfriendsforward.com.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. Our next topic that we're going to be talking about, we're talking about which generation has experienced the most tech change. Boomers will say that they've had the most tech change and how fast technology has grew up around them. Gen Xers would say we've gone from a bit of innovation. Millennials, you'll say you've experienced both analog and digital. Gen Z, they say that they've experienced the most social media changes, AI changes. So what are your guys' thoughts about which generation has experienced the most tech changes?
Well, you think about it, I don't know. I say it's got to go to the boomer because they're still alive today, and they have to put up with all the things like I think my mom still tries to poke me on Facebook. I'm not sure if that's still even a feature on it, but
poke.
You don't know what poking was? That was the thing when Facebook first started. You could poke virtually poke someone, which is like
just say, "Hey, I'm here."
It was such a violating feeling, even though they weren't doing anything. But
you've got 10
you've
pokes
been poked
today. Yeah,
oh my God.
That's what it was.
It started it was like this network where you can add friends, or initially started on a university campus. That'd be like a social networking thing there. But then you can kind of poke, I don't know if it was tapping or whatever. But
how you doing? What's up? What's shaking? What's going on? That was the whole idea. It was just to reach out and connect with friends you hadn't seen with in years.
Yeah. It reconnected. I remember when it first happened because it was a couple years after high school, and that's when everybody from high school started to add each other and find out. It was about 6 years after high school for me. So it was 2006, I think, when Facebook really came into the picture. Before that, there was MySpace, but it was kind of a place where you could reconnect with old high school buddies, because unless you went to the same university as them or you're in the same town, you wouldn't really know what they're doing. And that was the whole thing of like, I think all that stuff killed high school reunions, because it used to be the thing where you go to your 25th high school reunion, you find the nerdy kid is now like a multi-millionaire with like a supermodel side chick, and then you got the athletic dude who's now balding and like living in his mom's basement still and has
divorced 2 times.
Been a failure to launch kind of thing. But it was always a surprise when you go to your 20th anniversary or 20th reunion, but you don't have that anymore with social media. Boomers, I don't know, I think they've got to go through all the changes because technology, those things, and they're trying to keep up. But
what kind of changes the boomers experience? They had vinyl records. They went into audio 8-tracks.
Yeah, 8-tracks.
And then they went into cassette tapes, and then into CDs, DVDs, MP3s.
Like up until a couple of years ago, my dad was still making me DVDs of things. I'm like, Dad, I haven't had a DVD player for 6 years.
Yeah. Well, my generation, we had VHS. Like, who watches a VHS? Well, this is the funny thing that we were talking to my nephew Tyler about was some of the things that we had to experience back then was at the end of the movie, we had to rewind the tape or we would get fined when we returned it to the Blockbusters or the video rental stores. He's like, what? Rewind? What does that mean? It's like, no, it's a physical tape that would be played out, and then it had a little sticker on there that says, please be kind, rewind. Yes. And then we would get a $5, $10, or $2 fine put on our account if we didn't rewind.
Although I have to say, like for Kian's generation, it's the tough part you guys face with social media is that when I worked with teens for years, is cyberbullying became a thing. Like that was never a thing in my generation. It was never a thing in Nate's generation. Where like if you got bullied at school, person. Yeah, or if you got bullied at school, it was at school, and that was it. And then you'd go away, and you could be able to get away from it. Where now, cyberbullying, it's like hitting you at all times of the day, 24/7, and you can't escape it, and that kind of stuff. And that's where, so some of those like social dynamics, or whatever you call that, are I think, tougher for younger generations where they don't have the same skill set to walk away from those things like we did growing up. So there are some things where I think they have it tougher too.
And then when you do walk away from things now, there's this whole idea that walking away from it makes you a scaredy cat. They use a different word, but then they're like, oh, you're really going to take that? Like other people try to, they're like, you have to fight or else you're lame. I don't know. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
That's a tale as old as time. You got people who try and bully because they've got nothing else going for them. And they're like, oh, you're going to walk away. They use their only gift that they have, which is physical violence and intimidating them, because when you're walking away, you're taking that power away from them.
No.
Yeah. And when I walk away, it's like, no, I'm not walking away because I'm scared. I'm walking away because I don't want to fight you and then go to work with a busted face. Like, that's silly.
The unfortunate part is they're using emotional manipulation, which now it's morphed into the cyber realm. Emotional manipulation is more of a big thing too out there, because I know people who have gotten where they'll take pictures of you and then they'll ransom you or they'll blackmail you because, hey, we've got nude pictures of you or we've got compromising pictures of you. So that can be a scary generation. Like what's going to happen now when AI starts getting a little bit better and you have now imaginary situations made up. Is it real or is it AI?
Social media right now, like my Instagram feed, no matter what, I can't escape stupid AI videos where people now, all the number one comment in all these videos is like, who's tired of AI? Like, just because like people are putting all these like crazy things. Like I saw like a guy sitting on the edge of a mountain and a monkey comes and steals his umbrella and then flies away. And at first you look at it, you're like, okay, that thing kind of seemed a little legit. But then like if you don't know how to read between the lines, but it's just a matter of time before we won't be able to figure out the difference between AI and reality. And that's the unfortunate part for the younger generation. I'd say Gen Alpha. Like, yes, they're already skeptical to AI and understanding it, but at some point there's going to be a point where where they're not going to be able to differentiate, and then
You're gonna have to
I think
push
there's going
back.
to be a big pursuit for truth, like what is real, what is not real, and so
They
like
put
as
safety rails on life.
a boomer, they don't like they're not world's not all brought up in that.
Well, with the way that technology has changed so fast, like how are boomers dealing with that? If you're a boomer, how do you deal with that? Do you
share
have
it, thinking those things are real?
Yeah, well, how do you differentiate? How do you tell the difference? How have you made your skill set better? Let us know down in the comments.
Did that go too deep? Like,
Nah, maybe. Well, let's take that.
We can
as
always
a sign
cut it up.
Yeah. Well, let's take that then as a sign to take a quick little break. Stay with us because we got a cool little kicker story that you guys will find interesting.
At Abbotsford Sun Hangdao, every class has a step towards confidence, focus, and fitness. Kids gain respect and self-discipline. Adults build strength and resilience, all in a welcoming community. Start your journey today at sunhangdao.com/Abbotsford-Marshall-Arts and try a free class.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. This is XYYourZ, the generational comedy debate show. On today's kicker story, we've got a toy with you that I don't think anyone here has ever played with. For good reason, because it was deemed so dangerous, Radar magazine dubbed it one of the 10 most dangerous toys of all times. It is this. Gilbert Nuclear Physics Atomic Energy Lab. It was a little science project and a science fair and a little lab where you can do, small experiments. But this was launched back in the height of the nuclear era.
oh yeah.
It was in a time where there was not a lot was known about the effects of, say, radiation, because included in this were things like radium, cesium, highly radioactive elements that you could put up and create your own cloud chamber or crazy things like that. So, here's a whole bunch of radioactive material, kids. Have fun.
Yeah.
That does seem like it's pretty cool, but that's dangerous. That's cool if you're playing with it with the right material on.
It's funny because we look at that today and go, that's dangerous because we now know, but they didn't know that then because the effects of radiation wouldn't happen for years.
We're not well studied at all.
No.
It's like
and the effects of it didn't happen right away. And so that was the, but so it's always funny because you always talk about what is like I was joking, like what's the smoking of our generation? Because smoking for years was lobbied as it's good for your health and
the menthol sticks, yeah.
Yeah, it's like now they're like it's actually horrible where the majority now of our population does not smoke. But it's like what today is the smoking of this generation? Like people are like, oh, is it Wi-Fi? Like is it cell phone signal? People are like, it's 5G. Cell phone.
I know in my time back in the 80s, there was a rash of toys that were launched out, toys and pajamas that were made from a material that was highly flammable. Like one little spark, and then you turned into the Human Torch in 10 seconds. Right? Yeah. They are pajamas. They are fuzzy. Kids were leaning up against space heaters and then catching on fire, or mom and dad with their cigarettes and you spark an ash, next thing you know. Or couches were made out of the same material. They would go up in an instant. You can see videos of that on the web today. So what's the equivalent today? What do you think the next the big thing or crazy thing is going to be? Or do you think we've gotten better at identifying those things?
Kian, what do you think it is?
I think it's cell phones. I've seen people, clips of people walking around with just a clear case, pretending to use their cell phone, fake pictures, because they're trying to get out of the addiction of using their phone every 2 seconds. They can't, get off their phone.
So you think
it's not environmental, it's more psychological, is what the issue is.
That's where it's going into.
Right,
and vaping. Vaping's really bad right now. they're like getting kids into it. They have all these vaping is supposed to be made for you to stop smoking cigarettes and slowly ease off and then be doing nothing. But they're making these flavors like cotton candy and blue raspberry. Who's that marketed to? That's not marketed to a guy who's trying to get off a cigarette. That's marketed to a kid, right? Yeah. It's a juicy flavor.
Where your head's just lost in a cloud of...
Yeah.
What about I remember. What about Zins? Zins are the new popular one.
Oh, Zins are popular now with
my buddies
not
all
getting off. Yeah, they're the little pouches of nicotine that you can put into your. Yeah.
So to say they don't have all the dangerous things of like cigarette and tobacco, but it's just nicotine, which is like, that's how they shop it to me. It's like.
That's still addictive.
It's still addictive, and nicotine is horrible for you. It is a toxin that plants use as insecticide, right? So you're putting this stuff into you. Nicotine destroys, or the one major negative that it does against the body is it actually destroys your vascular system. So your veins and your arteries, it literally destroys them. Wow. So we know that because of Grandpa, who just does his cigarettes and beers, was a smoker for 40 years, had to have his lower aorta had to have it. The whole thing had to have a synthetic one put in, right? So that takes the blood from the heart and distributes it to the lower half of the body.
It's the biggest artery you have. Yeah.
And that was because of his cigarette smoking, and that the cigarette smoking jacks up your cholesterol. So now you've got clogs in carotid arteries, you got clogs everywhere in the legs. When you think about that, so if you're taking nicotine straight into the back, if you don't move that around, what you don't hear is how many people taking the Zins now have open sores in their mouths because the nicotine is basically just eating up the flesh around it.
It's crazy. I haven't thought about that.
Well, back in the 60s, you had this birthing contraceptive. You had this new contraceptive that they thought was going to work. Thiamalazide really didn't work, but it caused huge deformities in kids where babies were being born.
Babies?
Yeah, where they're being born without limbs. Or without the extremities. So definitely look that information up on the internet, because that was a scary time. So I know our mom and dad, since they went through something like that, they think everything is like that. They think everything is like, oh, I'm not going to try this vaccine because you're going to have birth defects. I'm not going to try this medication because you're going to have birth defects. I'm like, if you only took the medication, maybe you would still be alive today.
Yeah. It's it's just funny looking at all the stuff from then, right? Like I remember Mom would tell me stories about when she was a little girl in school. They would play with mercury, like open mercury in their hands. Like she's like, I remember how it would ball up and it would just kind of roll around your hands, and it was kind of cool. I'm like, oh geez, that stuff's highly toxic, or just crazy, or the Wizard of Oz. What's his name? The guy who played the Tin Man, because he had aluminum powder on his makeup, that he had to be in an iron lung after that because it destroyed his lung. So he was in an iron lung for the rest of his life.
That's terrible. He became the Tin Man because he played the Tin Man.
Hey-o.
Boom shakalaka. There you go.
All right. Well, that wraps up this recording. Thanks for joining us. If you guys have your questions or comments, please send them to us at info@XYZ.
Is that 2 Y's? XYYourZ?
Yes. XYYourZ. All right. I am happy you guys came out. Thanks for joining us. Leave your comments if you want to support us. Please visit this below.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. And as we always say, be kind, rewind.